The archive of 10,000 stars had stood for 11 million years, its crystalline towers rising from the dead moon of Zarvenphos like fingers reaching toward infinity. Within its halls, the chroniclers of the Galactic Concord preserved every scrap of knowledge the galaxy had ever produced. Every treaty, every war, every species that had risen and fallen in the cosmic dance of civilization.
Archivist Telvenar had spent 300 years cataloging the section known as the Vault of Lost Peoples. It was a melancholy duty, tending to the memories of species that no longer existed. The Krelthani, who had sung their stars to death. The Vormoth Collective, consumed by their own synthetic children. The Dravos Empire, whose 13 billion citizens had vanished overnight without explanation. But there was one entry that had always troubled him more than the others. It was stored in a containment field that hummed with ancient energy, the only such protection in the entire vault. The scroll itself was not crystalline like proper Concord records. It was organic, a dried material the database identified as paper, inscribed with a dark fluid the database identified as ink. The species was catalogued under a single word, Terrans.
Telvenar's 4 manipulator tendrils trembled slightly as he brought up the entry on his display screen. He had read it perhaps 1,000 times over the centuries, and still it unsettled him. Species designation, Terran, self-designated, human. Origin world, Earth, Sol 3, Orion Arm, Milky Way Galaxy. Classification, Apex Predator, Category Omega. Status, mythological, unconfirmed. Threat assessment, absolute. The entry continued with fragments of data recovered from sources so ancient that even the Concord's finest historians could not verify their authenticity. References to a war that had consumed half the galaxy. Descriptions of beings that defied classification, neither cold logic nor pure instinct, but something terrifyingly in between. Accounts of impossible victories against overwhelming odds, of ships that flew into the hearts of stars and emerged intact, of soldiers who fought until their bodies failed and then somehow fought still. And then, approximately 12 million years ago, they had simply stopped. No records of their destruction, no evidence of their exodus, no explanation for their absence. Just silence. The official position of the Galactic Concord was that the Terrans had never existed at all. The ancient records were dismissed as propaganda from forgotten wars, exaggerated legends that had grown in the telling. No species matching their description had been encountered in the millions of years since those records were created. No artifacts bearing their signature technology had ever been recovered. Their homeworld, this mythical Earth, had never been located despite extensive surveys of the Orion Arm. They were, the Council of Elders had declared, a fiction, a cautionary tale, perhaps, invented by ancient civilizations to frighten their children. Nothing more. But Telvenar had read the records too many times to dismiss them so easily. The paper scroll in his containment field bore the seal of the first Concord, the precursor civilization that had united the galaxy before the current order. The first Concord had been meticulous in their documentation. They did not invent species. They did not fabricate threats. And the terror in those ancient words was too raw, too genuine to be mere fiction. They called them the persistent. The scroll read in a passage Telvenar had memorized long ago. For they would not cease, could not cease. They pursued vengeance across light years, across generations, across the death of stars themselves. They remembered every wound inflicted upon them, and they repaid each one 1,000-fold. We thought we could outlast them. We were wrong.
We thought we could outthink them. We were wrong. We thought, in our desperation, that we could negotiate with them. We were wrong again. There is no peace with the persistent. There is only the hope that they will forget you, and they never forget. Telvenar shuddered, his scales rippling with unease. A myth, he reminded himself. Nothing but a myth. His communicator chimed, breaking his reverie. The face of Senior Chronicler Varmoth appeared on the small screen, her aged features tight with an expression Telvenar had never seen on her before. Fear. Archivist Telvenar, she said, her voice trembling. Report to the Central Observatory immediately. There has been a development. What manner of development, Senior Chronicler? Varmoth's compound eyes glistened with moisture, a stress response in her species. The Korvathi Empire. They are gone. Gone? Telvenar repeated, not understanding. Destroyed. 17 star systems. 300 billion souls. Eliminated in a single night cycle. And Telvenar. She paused, struggling to form the words. The witnesses, the few survivors who escaped, they speak of ships. Ships bearing symbols we have only seen in one place. Telvenar felt his heart stop. The Vault of Lost Peoples, Varmoth whispered. They match the markings on your Terran scroll. Ambassador Zireth Valkorath had served the Korvathi Empire for 200 years. She had negotiated treaties with species so alien that their thought patterns defied comprehension. She had walked the halls of power on 100 worlds, spoken before the Grand Assembly of the Concord, dined with god emperors and hive queens and digital consciousnesses that spanned star systems. She had never known terror until 3 days ago. Now she sat in a sterile medical bay on Concord Station Prime, her magnificent azure plumage dulled and patchy from stress, her taloned hands gripping the examination table hard enough to score the medal. Around her, a dozen Concord officials listened to her account with expressions ranging from skepticism to horrified fascination. Begin again, Ambassador, said High Counselor Trethna, the ancient Velmaran who led the session, from the moment of first contact. Zareth closed her eyes, and the memories came flooding back whether she wanted them or not. It had started with the colony world of Korvath 7, a minor agricultural planet on the Empire's outer rim. Communications had gone silent without warning. Not unusual, stellar phenomena often disrupted subspace channels in that region. A patrol fleet had been dispatched to investigate. They never returned. A larger fleet followed. 40 warships, including 2 of the Empire's mighty Devastator-class dreadnoughts. Their last transmission had been a single word, screamed across every frequency simultaneously: retreat. By then, the Emperor had taken notice. The entire 7th Armada was mobilized. 800 ships, the pride of Korvathi military might, veterans of a dozen wars. They jumped to the Korvath 7 system, prepared for battle. What they found instead was a graveyard. The colony was simply gone, Zyreth said, her voice hollow. Not destroyed. Gone. As if it had never existed. The planet was scoured down to bedrock. No buildings, no bodies, no wreckage. Just smooth stone where 3 million of my people had lived. And the patrol fleet? Trethna prompted. Debris. The particles were so fine that our sensors initially mistook them for a dust cloud. Our finest warships, reduced to atoms. The officials exchanged uneasy glances. The Korvathi were not a weak species. Their technology was advanced, their military formidable. Whatever had done this possessed power beyond anything in the Concord's experience.
"Continue," Trethna said.
Zirith's hands began to shake. We thought it was over. Some kind of cosmic event, perhaps. A natural disaster. We began surveying the system for evidence. And then they came. She fell silent for a long moment, lost in the horror of the memory. They emerged from the darkness between stars. No hyperspace signatures. No transition flash. One moment the void was empty, the next it was filled with ships. Hundreds of them, thousands, more ships than I had ever seen in one place.
"Describe them," said a Concord intelligence officer, stylus poised over his data slate.
"Gray," Zirith whispered. "Gray like the iron we use for our buildings. Angular, brutal shapes. No elegance, no artistry. These were not ships designed for diplomacy or exploration. They were weapons, pure and simple. Killing machines given form." She shuddered. "And they bore symbols, white symbols against the gray. Strange characters, angular and harsh. And on every ship, on every hull, there was one image that appeared again and again. A sphere. Blue and green and white, like a planet, but twisted somehow. Wrong." In the corner of the room, Archivist Talvenar felt his blood run cold. He had seen that image before, in the Vault of Lost Peoples, on a scroll that was 12 million years old. "We attempted communication," Zirith continued. "Standard greeting protocols, trade inquiries, neutral greetings. We even transmitted surrender signals, though our pride burned at the thought. There was no response, not a single acknowledgement. It was as if we did not exist to them, as if we were beneath their notice. And then they opened fire." The room fell absolutely silent. "I have witnessed battles," Zirith said. "I have seen empires fall and species die. But I have never seen destruction like this. Their weapons, I do not have words for their weapons. Light brighter than suns. Energies that twisted space itself. Our shields might as well have been made of paper. Our armor might as well have been air. Ships that had survived a dozen wars simply ceased to exist." Tears were streaming down her face now, matting the feathers beneath her eyes. 800 ships, 3 million soldiers, gone in less than an hour. I only survived because the Admiral ordered a retreat before the battle was fully joined. My diplomatic vessel was fast, far from the main engagement. I watched the slaughter from the edge of the system as we fled.
"And the remaining Korvathi systems?" Trethna asked, though his voice suggested he already knew the answer.
"Destroyed. All of them. 16 more worlds. We tried to evacuate. We tried to fortify. We tried to hide. It made no difference. They found every colony, every station, every hidden outpost. They left nothing. No survivors. No ruins. Just empty rock where our civilization had stood." "Except you," someone noted. Zirith nodded slowly. "Except me, and a handful of others who happened to be in Concord space when the attacks began. Perhaps 10,000 of us, scattered across the galaxy. All that remains of the Korvathi Empire." "Do you have any idea why they did this?" Trethna asked. "Any indication of their motives?" Zirith laughed, a harsh, broken sound. "No. Yes. I don't know. There was a single transmission at the very end, before my ship jumped to safety. A single message, broadcast on all frequencies." She closed her eyes, and recited words that would haunt her until the end of her days.
The Korvathi Empire, 17,000 years ago, participated in the Purge of Soul. This debt is now paid.
Silence.
17,000 years ago, Trefna repeated slowly. That is, before the current Korvathi civilization existed, Zirith said, before our written history, before our recorded memory. Whatever we did to offend them, we do not even remember doing it. But they remembered. Across 17 millennia, they remembered. The Grand Assembly of the Galactic Concord had not convened in emergency session for over 1,000,000 years. The last time had been the Entropy Plague, a cosmic phenomenon that threatened to unravel the fabric of space-time itself. It had taken the combined resources of 17 elder species to contain that disaster. Now, 300 representatives from across known space gathered in the Assembly's crystalline amphitheater, their voices a cacophony of alarm and confusion. Holographic displays showed the devastation, before and after images of Korvathi worlds, sensor readings from the handful of escape pods that had made it out, enhanced images of the unknown warships. And on the central display, rotating slowly, was a symbol, a blue and green and white sphere, partially obscured by white wisps that the database identified as clouds. Earth, Talvinar said, his voice barely above a whisper. He stood at the center of the assembly floor, surrounded by the most powerful beings in the galaxy, feeling smaller than he ever had in his 3-century life. The homeworld of the species known as Terrans, known in their own tongue as humans.
The chamber erupted in chaos. "Impossible!" shouted the Velmoran delegate. "The Terrans are a myth, a legend." "Legends do not destroy 17 star systems in a single night," countered the representative from the Syntax Collective. "This is clearly a false flag attack, some rival power seeking to sow confusion."
The energy signatures do not match any known technology. Who could fabricate such a thing? High Counselor Trethna raised his manipulator appendages, and slowly, reluctantly, the chamber fell silent.
"Archivist Talvenar," he said, "you are the foremost expert on the Terran records. I must ask you directly, is it possible? Could these attackers truly be the mythological humans?"
Talvenar took a long, slow breath. The Terran records in the archive are fragmentary and incomplete. Much of what we know comes from sources so ancient that verification is impossible. However, he gestured, and the holographic display changed to show passages from the scrolls he had spent centuries studying. The accounts describe a species of bipedal carbon-based life forms, approximately 2 meters in height, possessing unusual physiological characteristics. They are described as pursuit predators, built for endurance rather than speed. They metabolize a toxic and highly corrosive atmospheric gas for energy.
"Oxygen?" someone asked. "That is hardly unusual."
In concentrations of 20% or higher, Talvenar clarified, combined with exposure to the unfiltered radiation of their home star, their world's gravity is also notably higher than galactic average. The records describe them as unnervingly durable, capable of surviving injuries that would kill most other species. He paused. But their physical characteristics are not what made them dangerous. The records speak of their minds, their thought patterns. The Terrans were categorized as apex predators not because of their bodies, but because of their psychology. "Explain," Trethna commanded.
They are described as possessing a unique capacity for what the ancient texts call spite, the ability to endure any hardship, any sacrifice, any loss, if it means the destruction of their enemies. They would burn their own worlds rather than let them be taken. They would fight battles they could not win simply to inflict casualties. They would pursue vengeance across generations, across millennia, across any span of time.
Talvanar's voice dropped. The records say that the first species to make war upon the Terrans did so expecting an easy victory. They outnumbered the humans 1,000 to 1. They possessed technology far in advance of anything the Terrans had developed. They calculated that the conquest would take a single rotation of the Terran homeworld.
"What happened?" asked the Syntex delegate. "The war lasted 300 years. The aggressor species no longer exists. Neither do 7 other civilizations that made the mistake of allying with them. The Terrans pursued them to the edges of the galaxy and beyond. They built ships specifically designed to hunt survivors. They developed weapons that could sterilize entire sectors of space. And when it was done, when every member of those 8 species had been tracked down and eliminated, the Terrans simply vanished."
The chamber was utterly silent. The last entry in the records dates to 12 million years ago, Talvanar continued. It is a single line written by a chronicler whose name has been lost to time. It says, "The persistent have returned to their slumber. May they never wake again."
"Slumber," Trethna repeated. "Not death, not extinction. Slumber."
That is what the record says. The Velmoran delegate spoke up, his voice trembling. If this is true, if these truly are the Terrans of legend, why have they returned? What do they want? Talvanar thought of the message that had been broadcast to the dying Korvathi fleet. The Korvathi Empire, 17,000 years ago, participated in the Purge of Soul. "I believe," he said slowly, "that they want revenge. The ancient records speak of an alliance of species that attempted to exterminate the Terrans near the end of the last Great War. The Purge of Soul, an attempt to destroy their homeworld and end them forever."
"The Korvathi," someone breathed. "They were part of this alliance."
The Korvathi of 17,000 years ago, yes. Different culture, different government, different individuals, but the same species. And if the Terrans remember debts that are 17 millennia old... He did not need to finish the sentence. The implications were horrifically clear. "What other species participated in this purge?" Trethna asked, his voice tight. Talvanar called up another display. A list of names appeared, some familiar, some lost to history. The Korvathi Empire, the Dominion of Zar, the Collective of Yith, the Holy Hegemony of Vorn, He stopped. His manipulator tendrils had begun to shake. "Continue, Archivist." "The first Concord," Talvanar whispered. "The precursor to our own Galactic Concord. They led the Alliance." The chamber exploded into pandemonium. The days that followed were the most chaotic in the Concord's history. Emergency sessions stretched into marathon debates. Defense fleets were mobilized, then stood down, then mobilized again. Diplomats drafted 100 different proposals for contact, negotiation, surrender. Scientists analyzed every scrap of data from the Korvathi destruction, searching for weaknesses that might be exploited. They found none. The Terran warships possessed technology that defied analysis.
Their weapons operated on principles that Concord physics said should be impossible. Their shields shrugged off attacks that should have shattered planets. Their speed and maneuverability exceeded anything in the known galaxy. Worse, attempts to locate their fleet had failed completely. The ships had appeared, annihilated the Korvathi, and vanished without a trace. Sensor sweeps of the Orion Arm found nothing. Probes sent to the region where Earth should exist, according to ancient records, reported only empty space. It was as if the Terrans were ghosts, emerging from the void to strike, then fading back into nothingness. Until the message arrived. It came simultaneously to every communications array in the Concorde, overriding security protocols, bypassing encryption, manifesting on screens across 1,000 worlds. A simple text transmission rendered in every known language. To the Galactic Concorde. 12 million years ago, your predecessors made a choice. They decided that humanity was a threat that could not be tolerated. They formed an alliance of 18 species and launched an assault on our homeworld. They called it the Purge of Sol. They failed. Earth survived. Humanity endured. And we remembered. For 12 million years, we have waited. We have rebuilt. We have prepared. Our children's children's children, unto 1,000 generations, have been raised with one sacred duty, to remember the debt that is owed. The Korvathi were the first to pay. They will not be the last. The following species participated in the Purge of Sol and continue to exist in some form. They have 30 of your standard days to present themselves at the coordinates attached to this message. They will face judgment for their ancestors' crimes. The Dominion of Zar. The Collective of Yith. The Velmarans. The Galactic Concorde itself. If these species fail to appear, we will come to them. The consequences will be severe. We are humanity. We are patient. We do not forgive. We do not forget. Earth endures. In the 30 days that followed, the galaxy prepared for war. The Dominion of Zar, proud and ancient, mobilized its legendary war spheres, moon-sized battle stations that had conquered half the galaxy in ages past. 400 of them gathered at the border of their territory, bristling with weapons that could crack planets like eggs. The Collective of Yith, masters of genetic engineering, awakened their bio-titans, living ships grown from the flesh of ancient cosmic beasts, their hulls impervious to conventional weapons, their organic cannons capable of firing streams of antimatter. The Velmarans called upon their psychic might, gathering their strongest telepaths and telekinetics into war covens that could turn enemy crews against each other or crush starships with the power of thought alone. And the Galactic Concorde itself drew upon the combined resources of 300 member species, trillions of soldiers, millions of warships, the accumulated military might of a civilization that had ruled the galaxy for eons. Against any other enemy, it would have been overwhelming. Against any other enemy, victory would have been assured. But Archivist Telvenar, watching the preparations from his post in the archive, felt no confidence. He had spent his life studying the Terran records. He had read the accounts of ancient battles, of impossible victories, of enemies who had faced the humans with everything they had and been swept aside like dust before a hurricane. And he noticed something that the military commanders seemed to be ignoring. The message had said that 18 species had participated in the Purge of Sol. The Korvathi were one. The Dominion, the Collective, the Velmorans, and the Concord were 4 more. That left 13 others. 13 species that the Terrans had already judged and found wanting. 13 species that no longer existed. The coordinate specified in the Terran message was a point in deep space, far from any star system, a region of perfect emptiness where nothing lived and nothing grew. It was here that the Allied fleets gathered, forming a battle formation that stretched for light years in every direction. Admiral Zeth Vorn of the Velmaran High Command stood on the bridge of his flagship, the Thought Eternal, surrounded by his most powerful telepaths. He had fought in 100 battles, commanded fleets that had crushed rebellions and repelled invasions. He was not afraid. But as the hour of judgment approached, he felt something he had never experienced before on the eve of battle. Doubt. "Contact," reported his sensor officer, her voice tight. "Multiple hyperspace signatures. Distance 10 light minutes. And, Admiral, the signatures are not conventional. Our sensors cannot determine their point of origin. It is as if they emerged from nowhere." On screen, Zeth Vorn commanded. The main display flickered, then resolved into an image that would haunt every being who witnessed it. Ships, thousands of ships, tens of thousands, more ships than the combined fleets of the Allied species had ever assembled in one place. They filled the void like a swarm of gray locusts, their angular hulls reflecting the distant light of foreign stars. And at their center, dwarfing everything else, was a vessel so massive that Zeth Vorn's mind initially refused to process what it was seeing. It was shaped like a predator's fang, a knife aimed at the heart of the galaxy. Its dimensions defied belief. 100 kilometers long, 50 wide. Its hull was studded with weapons emplacements that made Velmaran war spheres look like toys. The symbol of Earth blazed on its prow, rendered in burning light.
"All ships, prepare for," Zeth Vorn began.
A transmission cut him off, overriding every frequency simultaneously. A voice, a single voice, speaking in tones of absolute authority. "I am Admiral Sarah Chen of the Terran Expeditionary Force. You have been summoned to face judgment for your role in the Purge of Soul. This tribunal will now commence. This is Admiral Zeth Vorn of the Velmaran High Command. We do not recognize your authority. We were not responsible for events that occurred millions of years before our species achieved sentience. We demand. You demand nothing." The voice was cold as the void itself. The Velmarans of 12 million years ago provided the psychic weaponry that was used to torture captured human soldiers. They extracted the locations of our hidden colonies from the minds of our prisoners. 14 billion humans died because of the intelligence your ancestors provided. Do you deny this? Zeth Vorn's blood ran cold. He had no idea if the accusation was true. No Velmaran records existed from that era, but the certainty in the human's voice left no room for doubt. "We cannot be held responsible for 12 million years," Admiral Chen continued, as if he hadn't spoken. "That is how long we have waited. That is how long we have prepared. Do you think we would come all this way, across all this time, without absolute certainty of your guilt? We have records. We have evidence. We have the testimonies of your own ancestors, captured and preserved for this very day."
The screen flickered again, and Zeth Vorn found himself looking at an image that shattered everything he thought he knew. It was a holographic recording, impossibly old, impossibly well preserved. It showed a Velmoran in ancient ceremonial robes speaking directly to the camera.
The human prisoners have been processed, the ancient Velmoran said, his voice proud and cruel. Their minds have yielded the locations of 37 hidden colonies. The Purge Fleet will eliminate these populations within the next cycle. The Terran threat will be ended. Glory to the Concord. Death to the persistent.
The recording ended. That, Admiral Chen said, was High Telepath Vorneth, your most honored ancestor. His statue still stands in your capital city. You named your flagship after his doctrine of mental supremacy. Would you like us to play more recordings? We have thousands. Audio, video, psychic imprints. We recorded everything.
Zeth Vorn found that he could not speak.
The Dominion of Zar provided the weapons that glassed the Asian continent of Earth. The Collective of Yith engineered the plague that killed 40% of humanity's children. The Galactic Concord coordinated the entire assault, provided the fleets, selected the targets, and gave the final order. You all share in the crime. You all share in the guilt. What do you want? Zeth Vorn finally managed. The pause before the answer was terrifying. We want you to understand, Admiral Chen said. We want you to know that this is not random. This is not aggression. This is justice delayed but not denied. You tried to murder our species. You almost succeeded. Billions of our people died. Billions. And for 12 million years, every human child has been raised with the knowledge of what was done to us. Every human child has been taught to remember, and every human child has been prepared for this day. The stars themselves seemed to dim. We could destroy you, the Admiral continued. Right now, this moment, every ship in your combined fleet could be rendered to vapor before your gunners could fire a single shot. We have spent 12 million years advancing our technology, our tactics, our capabilities. You have spent those same 12 million years stagnating, fighting petty wars, believing yourselves safe. Zeth Vorn felt his psychic senses brushing against the human fleet, seeking the minds within those gray hulls. What he felt made him recoil in horror. Billions of minds, billions of humans packed into those warships, every one of them burning with a singular, focused purpose. There was no fear in them, no doubt, no hesitation, only an absolute crystalline determination that defied every psychological model he had ever encountered. But we are not going to destroy you, Admiral Chen said. Not today. For the first time, Zeth Vorn felt a flutter of hope. It died with the Admiral's next words. Destruction would be too easy, too quick, too merciful. Your ancestors made humanity suffer for centuries before the Purge. They hunted us, tormented us, made us watch as our worlds burned. They did not give us a quick death, and we will not give one to you. Then what? Zeth Vorn asked, dreading the answer. You will remember, Admiral Chen said. You will live with the knowledge of what was done in your name. You will pass that knowledge to your children, and they to their children, and so on until the end of time. Every generation of your species will know that they exist only because humanity allows it. Every child will be taught that their ancestors committed the greatest crime in galactic history, and you will never, ever forget. The screen displayed new images now, documents, treaties, demands. You will dismantle your militaries. You will surrender your weapons. You will open your worlds to human inspection, and you will submit to human oversight. You will pay tribute, not in resources, not in wealth, but in labor. Your brightest minds will work to repair the damage done to humanity. Your scientists will share all knowledge with us freely. Your artists will create monuments to human suffering, and your priests will add our dead to their prayers.
This is slavery, Zethvorn whispered.
No, Admiral Chen replied. This is reparation. Slavery is what you intended for us had the purge succeeded. We found your plans. We know what you meant to do with our survivors. The breeding camps, the mind wipes, the domestication protocols. Compared to what you planned for us, what we ask of you is mercy. For 7 days, the Allied fleets remained frozen in space, paralyzed by the impossible choice before them. Surrender meant the end of their autonomy, the dissolution of everything they had built. Resistance meant death, not just for their soldiers, but for their entire species. In the Grand Assembly, debates raged without end. Some called for defiance, preferring a glorious death to an eternity of servitude. Others argued for acceptance, pointing out that survival, even diminished survival, was better than extinction. Still others proposed negotiation, hoping to find some middle ground that might satisfy human demands without complete capitulation. Through it all, archivist Talvenar worked. He had abandoned the Vault of Lost Peoples, instead focusing all his efforts on a single project, understanding the humans. Every scrap of data from the Korvathi destruction, every word of the Terran transmissions, every fragment of ancient record that mentioned the mysterious species. He compiled it all, analyzed it, searched for patterns. And slowly, a picture began to emerge. The humans were not monsters. They were not mindless killing machines or cosmic horrors. They were something far more frightening. They were rational. Every action they had taken followed a logical pattern. The annihilation of the Korvathi was not random cruelty. It was calculated, targeted, surgical. They had destroyed only those directly descended from the Purge participants. Korvathi diaspora populations in Concord space had been left untouched. The demands they had made were harsh, but not impossible. The tribute they asked was labor, not lives. The oversight they required was invasive, but not tyrannical. Compared to what they could have demanded, compared to what the ancient Concord had planned for them, it was almost generous. Almost. Talvenar found himself returning again and again to one phrase from the ancient scrolls. They remembered every wound inflicted upon them, and they repaid each one 1,000-fold. 1,000-fold. The purge of soul had killed billions of humans. The human response had killed, how many? The 13 extinct species from the original alliance. Countless others caught in the crossfire. And now, the Korvathi, 300 billion souls erased from existence. The mathematics were horrifying. If this was the pattern, if the humans truly intended to repay every wound 1,000-fold, then the judgment they had pronounced on the surviving species was indeed mercy. It was restraint. It was the humans choosing to be better than their ancestors' enemies had been. But it was also a warning. We could destroy you, Admiral Chen had said,
We choose not to. Today.
The implicit threat was clear. Humanity's mercy was conditional. It could be withdrawn at any time, for any reason. Every generation of the condemned species would live under that shadow, knowing that their existence depended on human forbearance.
It was, Talvinar realized, exactly what the ancient Concord had intended for humanity. A species subjugated, controlled, living only at the sufferance of their conquerors. The humans had simply inverted the dynamic.
He looked up to find High Counselor Trefna standing in the doorway of his research chamber. The ancient Velmoran looked older than Talvenar had ever seen him, not physically, but spiritually, as if the weight of the crisis had aged his very soul.
High Counselor, I did not expect.
The Assembly has made its decision, Trefna interrupted. We will accept the human terms. Talvenar felt a mix of relief and sorrow. I see.
There was no alternative. Our military advisors have concluded that resistance would be brief. The humans' technology is beyond anything we can counter. Our telepathies cannot read their minds. Their neural patterns are somehow shielded, perhaps engineered to be psychically opaque. Our weapons cannot penetrate their shields. Our ships cannot outrun their fleet. Fighting them would be suicide.
And so we surrender.
And so we survive. Trethna's voice was bitter. Is that not what the humans did 12 million years ago? They survived the purge. They endured. They waited. And now they have their vengeance. Do you think they will keep their word? That they will allow us to live?
Trethna was silent for a long moment. I do not know. I am not capable of understanding them. Their psychology, their motivations, their values, all of it is alien to me. But I know one thing. He looked directly at Talvenar. They have been planning this for 12 million years. Every detail of their return has been calculated, anticipated, prepared for. If they intended to destroy us, they would have done so already. The fact that they have offered terms at all suggests that they genuinely want something other than our extinction.
They want us to remember, Talvenar said softly. They want us to carry the weight of our ancestors' sins forever. They want the galaxy to know what was done to them, and to live with the guilt of that knowledge.
Yes. Trethna's manipulator appendages curled in a gesture of resignation. It is a sophisticated cruelty. Kill our bodies, and we simply die. But this makes us complicit in our own subjugation. Every time we look at a human, we will remember what was done in our name. Every time our children ask why we bow to Terran oversight, we will have to explain the crime that earned this punishment. The humans have found a way to make their vengeance eternal.
Or their justice, Talvenar murmured.
Trethna looked at him sharply. You sympathize with them? I have spent 300 years studying the records of the lost peoples. I have read the accounts of species who crossed the humans and paid the ultimate price. And I have read the accounts of the Purge, what the Concord and its allies did to humanity, the atrocities they committed in the name of security. Talvenar's scales rippled with emotion. I do not sympathize with the humans, but I understand them. If someone had done to our people what was done to theirs, would we not also seek justice? Would we not also remember? We would seek to move on, to forgive, to build a better future. Perhaps,
Or perhaps we tell ourselves that because we have never been tested as they were tested. Perhaps forgiveness is easy when you have never truly been wronged.
Trethna said nothing.
May I ask a question, High Counselor?
Speak. The ancient records mention 18 species that participated in the purge. 5 still exist in some form: the Korvathi, the Dominion, the Collective, the Velmorans, and the Concord. That leaves 13 others. What happened to them?
Trethna's eyes clouded with something that might have been shame.
They fought, he said quietly. When the humans first emerged from their long slumber, they came for the weakest of the purge species first. The ones who had declined, whose civilizations had crumbled. And those species, in their pride and their fear, chose to resist rather than submit.
And they are gone. Completely. Utterly. The humans did not merely defeat them, they erased them. Their worlds were scoured. Their records were burned. Their names were struck from every database in the galaxy. Today, the only evidence that they ever existed at all is in sealed archives like yours, and even those records are fragmentary.
Talvenar nodded slowly. And we chose to submit. We chose to live. Whatever else might be said of this day, the Concord chose survival over oblivion. Perhaps future generations will judge us cowards, but at least there will be future generations to make that judgment.
The signing of the Treaty of Sol took place on what the humans called neutral ground, a world they had constructed specifically for the occasion, built in the span of 6 months from raw asteroid material, a demonstration of manufacturing capabilities that left Concord engineers speechless.
Talvenar was among the delegations selected to witness the ceremony. He stood in a hall of white marble and glass, surrounded by representatives from every species that had agreed to human terms. The Dominion of Zar, their proud war spheres now decommissioned. The Collective of Yith, their bio-titans rendered dormant. The Velmorans, their war covens dispersed. And the Concord itself, its military reduced to a token peacekeeping force under human supervision. At the center of the hall stood the human delegation. This was Talvenar's first time seeing them in person, and he found himself staring despite his best efforts to maintain diplomatic composure. They were exactly as the ancient records described: bipedal, bilaterally symmetric, covered in a variety of skin tones from dark brown to pale pink. Their eyes were forward-facing, predator's eyes, and they moved with a fluid grace that spoke of countless generations of evolutionary refinement. But it was their expressions that captivated him. They were ordinary. That was the only word for it. They laughed, they joked with each other, they fidgeted during long speeches and rolled their eyes at bureaucratic formalities. They were not the cosmic horrors of legend, not the implacable killing machines that had erased civilizations. They were simply people. People who had endured the unendurable. People who had remembered the unforgivable. People who had waited 12 million years for this moment. The treaty was signed with traditional ceremony, each species adding their mark to a document that would reshape galactic civilization forever. When the human representative stepped forward to add Earth's signature, the hall fell absolutely silent. She was a woman of advanced years, her hair white, her face lined with the weight of centuries. But her eyes were clear and sharp, and her hand did not tremble as she took the stylus. "My name is Elena Vance," she said, her voice carrying easily through the hall. "I am the great-great-granddaughter of Sarah Vance, who was 14 years old when the purge began. Sarah survived the burning of Europe. She watched her parents die in the first bombardment. She spent 3 years in a Korvathi labor camp before escaping to the resistance. She fought for 60 years before dying of her wounds, and her final words were, "Remember."
She looked around the hall, meeting the eyes of every alien representative.
We remembered. Generation after generation, parent to child, grandparent to grandchild, we passed down the memories of what was done to us. We built our civilization around the sacred duty of remembrance. And now, at last, we have fulfilled the promise we made to our ancestors. She signed the treaty with a flourish. But this is not an ending, she continued. This is a beginning. We did not return to the galaxy to rule it. We did not spend 12 million years preparing for this moment simply to become the tyrants that the old Concord once was. We returned because the galaxy needed to remember. It needed to understand that actions have consequences, that crimes, no matter how old, demand justice, that no species, no matter how powerful, is above the moral law.
She stepped back from the podium.
The terms of this treaty are harsh, we know that, but they are fair. You will pay for what your ancestors did, but you will pay with labor, not lives, with service, not suffering, and in time, not years, not decades, but in time, the debt will be paid, the ledger will be balanced, and humanity will be satisfied. Talvanar found himself leaning forward. "How long?" he asked, breaking protocol. "How long until the debt is paid?" Elena Vance looked at him with something that might have been compassion. "The Purge killed 8 billion humans," she said. "Over the course of the war that followed, another 40 billion died. Countless more suffered in ways that death would have been a mercy. The trauma of those events echoed through 12 million years of human history, shaping our culture, our psychology, our very identity." She paused. "How long until that debt is paid? I do not know. Perhaps when every world that was burned has been restored. Perhaps when every species that participated has contributed to human flourishing in equal measure to the suffering they caused. Perhaps when the galaxy has changed so fundamentally that such atrocities can never happen again. And if we refuse, if future generations rebel against your terms, then we will remind you why you agreed to them in the first place." Her voice was calm, matter-of-fact, utterly without malice. "We are patient. We can wait another 12 million years if necessary. And our children's children's children will be raised with the same sacred duty that we were raised with. This is not a threat. It is simply a fact. Humanity does not forget. Humanity does not forgive. Humanity endures." 500 years passed. Talvenar, ancient beyond the normal span of his species, still walked the halls of the archive of 10,000 stars. His scales had faded to silver. His manipulator tendrils trembled with age, but his mind remained sharp. He had witnessed the transformation of galactic civilization, and he intended to witness more before his long life finally ended. The galaxy had changed. Human oversight was omnipresent but not oppressive. Teams of Terran observers monitored every major government, every military installation, every scientific facility. They did not interfere in internal affairs. They simply watched, recording, ensuring that the terms of the treaty were maintained. Their presence was a constant reminder of the price that had been paid for survival. But it was also, Talvenar had come to realize, a gift. With their military power broken, the species of the Concord had been forced to find other avenues for competition. Art flourished, philosophy bloomed,
Science advanced at a pace that astonished even the humans, driven by minds freed from the endless cycle of warfare that had consumed the galaxy for millions of years. And slowly, tentatively, the relationship between humanity and the rest of the galaxy began to change. The first interspecies friendships emerged. Humans and aliens working together, living together, building something new. Cultural exchange programs brought young members of every species to Earth, where they learned the history that had shaped humanity, walked the memorial sites where billions had died, and began to understand the trauma that had forged the Terran psyche. Some returned with horror, some with guilt, some with a newfound determination to ensure that such atrocities would never be repeated. And some returned with hope. Talvenar had visited Earth himself 70 years ago. He had walked the glass plains of Europe, where the sand had fused to smooth crystal under the heat of Korvathi weapons. He had visited the Memorial of Names, where the 8 billion dead of the Purge were listed on walls that stretched to the horizon. He had stood in the Hall of Remembrance, where holographic recordings of survivors told their stories to anyone who would listen. And he had met a human child. She was perhaps 10 years old, with dark hair and bright eyes, and she had found him standing before a monument to the victims of the Asian genocide. He had been weeping. The records in the archive did not do justice to the scale of the horror, the sheer magnitude of the loss. "Are you sad?" she had asked.
Yes, he had replied. Very sad.
Because of what happened here?
Yes, and because my ancestors helped make it happen.
The child had considered this for a long moment.
My grandmother says that the past is a ghost, she said finally. It can haunt us, but it can't hurt us, not unless we let it. Your grandmother sounds wise.
She is. She's one of the oldest people on Earth. She was born right after the awakening, when humanity came out of stasis. She says she remembers what it was like before, when we were just waiting, preparing, thinking about nothing but revenge.
And now?
The child smiled. A simple, genuine smile that held no trace of the cosmic grudge that had defined her species for 12 million years. Now we have other things to think about. Art, science, making friends with aliens. She paused, looking at him with eyes that seemed too old for her young face. My grandmother says that revenge was necessary, that we couldn't move forward until we had balanced the scales. But she also says that if revenge is all we ever think about, we become no better than the people who hurt us.
Do you believe that? Talvenar had carried that conversation with him ever since. It was, he had come to believe, the first sign of something new, something unprecedented. A galaxy that was not defined by the crimes of the past, but by the possibilities of the future. The humans were not finished with their vengeance, not yet. The terms of the Treaty of Soul remained in effect. The debt continued to be paid. But the hatred that had driven humanity for 12 million years was slowly, almost imperceptibly, beginning to fade. Not to be replaced by forgiveness. That, Talvenar suspected, would never come. The wounds were too deep, the trauma too fundamental. But perhaps by something else. Understanding, acceptance, a recognition that the children of today were not responsible for the sins of their ancestors, and that the future did not have to be a prisoner of the past. Perhaps, in the 517th year after the signing of the Treaty of Sol, archivist Talvenar made the final entry in his personal chronicle. His strength was failing, his time running short. But there was one last thought he wished to record. "I have spent my life studying the lost peoples," he wrote, his manipulator tendrils trembling over the crystal stylus. "I have catalogued the dead, the vanished, the forgotten.
I have read the accounts of civilizations that rose and fell, of species that achieved greatness and then crumbled to dust. And I have learned one truth that supersedes all others. The universe is not kind. It does not forgive. It does not forget. Every action sends ripples through the fabric of reality, consequences that cascade across millennia, shaping the fate of worlds yet unborn. The ancient Concord believed they could escape this truth. They believed they could commit an atrocity and move on, confident that time would wash away their sins. They were wrong. Time did not forget. Humanity did not forget. And 12 million years later, the bill came due. But there is another truth I have learned, one that gives me hope even as I approach my end. The universe may not forgive, but people can. Not easily, not quickly, not without scars, but it is possible. The child I met on Earth taught me that. Her smile, her hope, her simple belief that the future could be better than the past, these are the seeds of something new. The Concord chose guilt and expiation. We accepted our ancestors' sins as our own, and we have worked to make amends. But someday, perhaps not for centuries, perhaps not for millennia, we will be free. The debt will be paid. The ledger will be balanced. And humanity, at last, will be able to let go of its ancient grudge. On that day, the galaxy will truly begin anew. Until then, we wait. We endure. We remember. Just as humanity taught us to do. He set down the stylus, his work complete. Outside the archive, the stars continued their ancient dance, indifferent to the dramas that played out beneath them. Empires rose and fell. Species lived and died. Grudges were born and, eventually, laid to rest. And on a small blue world, in an unremarkable arm of an average galaxy, the children of Earth looked up at those stars and dreamed of the future. Not of vengeance. Not of justice, just the future. It was enough. The end